Isn't it something how even the smallest change can rattle the loudest cages? How a shift in a logo, just a few lines and letters, can uncover fears that were already sitting just beneath the surface? That's what we're seeing right now with Cracker Barrel, a restaurant chain's redesign, stirring up storms of nostalgia, anger, and culture wars, all over a name, a barrel, and a font. Now let's sit with this story for a moment because it says more than it seems. Cracker Barrel, a name that has lived on highways and side roads for decades, stamped across signs that promise biscuits, rocking chairs on a porch, and a version of Southern hospitality frozen in amber. Since its first opening back in 1969, the chain has made itself into more than just a restaurant. It became a symbol, a roadside ritual, a piece of identity for those who wanted that taste of a particular South. In 1969, their first logo was simple, just text, no frills, no extra design, just the words. Then in 1977, they added an image that stuck for nearly half a century, a man leaning against a barrel. That image came to define the brand. It told you, this is down home. This is rustic. This is tradition. It conjured up porch swings, sweet tea, and the smell of cornbread. But now, nearly 50 years later, the company decided to revisit its brand roots. They pulled back the man in the barrel, stripped it down, and returned to a text-only logo that echoes the very beginning. They called it part of their All the More campaign, meant to reintroduce new menu items, refreshed remodels, and a polished, modernized look. The CEO, Julie Fells-Massino, even went on Good Morning America and said the reception has been overwhelmingly positive. And maybe in the boardroom, in the marketing meetings, it was. Maybe some people saw the cleaner design and nodded their heads. But out in the wild, on social media, the response has been, well, let's just say not everyone's clapping their hands, because change, even small change, stirs emotions, especially when it brushes up against nostalgia, especially when it shakes people's sense of what feels familiar, safe, or the way it's supposed to be. And Cracker Barrel, whether it likes it or not, has always been more than a restaurant to many people. For some, it's a piece of their identity. So when the logo shifted, the internet lit up. MAGA supporters, conservatives, and lovers of unapologetically Southern branding started voicing their anger. For them, the redesign wasn't just a logo, it was a loss. They saw minimalism not as sleek, but as soulless. They saw the removal of the man and the barrel not as a brand update, but as erasure. They called it stupid, a sellout, the death of Southern charm. One comment captured that feeling loud and clear. This logo change and rebranding is so stupid. Cracker Barrel is unapologetically Southern. It's supposed to feel like you're stopping in at your mama's house. I hate minimalism. I have always hated minimalism. That word, mama, carried so much weight because that's what this outrage is really about. It's not about fonts. It's about memory. It's about people clinging to a picture of comfort, one that tells them the world hasn't moved too far from what they knew. Now, Lovayuh is not here to talk down to anybody for loving tradition. Tradition has a heartbeat, and sometimes it's what holds families together. But what I see here is a lesson. When people fight this hard over a logo, it's never really about the logo. It's about identity. It's about control. It's about the fear that something you cherished is slipping away piece by piece and you don't know how to stop it. And that's why logos and branding so often become cultural flashpoints. They aren't just symbols for the company. They become mirrors for society. They reflect back what people feel they've lost, what they're afraid of losing, or what they desperately want to hold on to. We've seen it before. Brands change and the internet erupts. Folks shout about wokeness, about companies caving in, about how design shifts are betrayals of something bigger. And while, yes, sometimes companies do make moves to be more inclusive or to align with the current cultural climate, sometimes, let's be real, it's just a logo redesign. Sometimes it's just a new font, a new color scheme, a marketing refresh. But once people's emotions get involved, it's no longer just. It becomes a battlefield for everything else they're holding inside. So Cracker Barrel steps out with a new logo, and instead of most people saying, okay, that's cleaner, it turns into an uproar. For many conservatives, especially MAGA folks, it became proof of a world they feel is changing too fast. Proof that even biscuits and gravy can't escape the march of modernity. Proof that what they call Southern charm is under attack by a culture they believe is erasing them. And that's why this story matters, not because of kerning or typography, not because of a barrel disappearing into thin air, but because of what it revealed. It revealed how fragile nostalgia can be. It revealed how attached people are to symbols, even corporate ones. It revealed how quickly a conversation about design can morph into a conversation about identity, heritage, and belonging. Now let's pause here, because I want to reflect on this with you. When you really think about it, Cracker Barrel is making a business decision. They're saying, we want to refresh, we want to modernize, we want to appeal to new generations. That's business. Companies rebrand all the time, and yet the outrage shows us something bigger. How many people build their sense of self around things outside of themselves? Around brands, around logos, around the comfort of seeing a man leaning against a barrel. It makes me think of how we, as people, often confuse symbols with substance, because that man against the barrel, he wasn't serving the food, he wasn't rocking on the porch, he wasn't filling the air with the smell of fried apples and bacon, he was just an image. And yet people are mourning his absence like an old friend. That tells us how powerful images can be, but it also tells us how quickly people can lose perspective. Because while folks are raging online about minimalism, there are deeper questions being overlooked, like what does the restaurant actually serve? Who feels welcome when they walk inside? What does Southern charm really mean? And who has it included or excluded in the past? Those questions go untouched because it's easier to rage over a logo than to wrestle with history. And Lovayuh, with all her subtle sass, has to point out, isn't it fascinating how loud people get when it comes to symbols and how quiet they become when it comes to substance? So here we are, watching folks treat a font like it's the end of the world, watching people argue that a company stripping away a little sketch of a man on a barrel is somehow stripping away their identity. And what that really shows us is how fear disguises itself. Fear rarely says, I'm afraid of change. Fear usually says, this logo is stupid, or this isn't Southern anymore. It hides behind outrage because admitting fear feels too vulnerable. And family, that's what I hear in these reactions. I hear fear of a South they feel is slipping away. I hear fear of a culture they thought was unchanging. I hear fear of being left behind, all wrapped up in a complaint about minimalism. Now, don't get me wrong, minimalism isn't everybody's flavor. Some folks want bold, busy, nostalgic designs because they feel warmer. They feel like home, and that's okay. But calling a redesign wokeness, that's where the truth spills out, because what they're really saying is, I don't like the direction this country is going. I don't like the way old symbols are being touched. I don't like being reminded that nothing stays the same forever. Cracker Barrel may have thought they were just doing a brand refresh, but what they really did was press a cultural button. They reminded people that time moves, that aesthetics shift, that businesses chase younger audiences. And when you're already worried that your world is changing too fast, a simple font feels like a personal attack. But here's the thing, nostalgia is tricky. Nostalgia tells us that the past was perfect. Nostalgia whispers that rocking chairs on the porch were sweeter, that sweet tea tasted better, that a man leaning against a barrel represented comfort instead of exclusion. Nostalgia glosses over the cracks in the paint, the parts of history that weren't so kind to everyone. And that's why this backlash fascinates me, because the same folks who are furious over a logo rarely raise their voices over deeper issues. They'll protect the image of a barrel harder than they'll protect the dignity of their neighbors. They'll rage over fonts while ignoring food workers who can't make a living wage. They'll cry over the death of Southern charm while turning their heads from the parts of the South that never felt charming to us. Let me put it plain. Symbols matter, but substance matters more. And when you invest all your energy into defending a symbol, you might just miss the bigger truth staring you in the face. Now let's be real. Cracker Barrel has always been complicated. For some, it's biscuits and gravy and memories of Mama's house. For others, it's not a place that always felt welcoming. So when people rage about Southern charm being erased, I have to ask, whose charm are we talking about? Whose nostalgia gets to dominate the conversation? Because for many, the good old days weren't good at all. That's where Lovayuh's subtle sass comes in. Because I have to chuckle at the idea that minimalism is the enemy, when the real enemy is stagnation. Fonts don't define culture. Barrels don't feed souls. A man leaning against a sketch of wood doesn't tell the full story of Southern life. If anything, The fact that folks feel this threatened by a design choice says more about them than it does about the logo. And let's talk about design itself. Minimalism is about stripping away, about going back to the essence. It's about clarity. And isn't it poetic that people are so upset about clarity? Because clarity forces you to see what's actually there. Without the man, without the barrel, all that's left are the words, the name, the brand itself. Maybe that's what makes people uncomfortable, the nakedness of simplicity. Because now you have to face it without nostalgia dressing it up. And isn't that a metaphor for so much of what we're living through? Stripping away illusions, stripping away comfort blankets, facing things as they are. It's unsettling, but it's necessary. Cracker Barrel didn't just change a logo. They unintentionally held up a mirror to a country divided between those who want to cling to old imagery and those who say we can still honor tradition without being frozen in it. And if a logo can spark this much outrage, imagine what deeper changes would do. But here's where I want to turn gentle again, because while it's easy to laugh at folks raging over a font, I also see the humanity in it. People are tired, people are scared, people are holding on to whatever feels solid as the world shifts under their feet. And if a barrel and a rocking chair made them feel safe, then of course they'll grieve its disappearance. We don't have to agree with their outrage to understand that it comes from longing. The real question, though, is what do we do with that longing? Do we use it to build bridges, to find new ways of holding on to community, to recognize that charm isn't just in rocking chairs, but in kindness? Or do we weaponize that longing, turn it into outrage, and make ourselves miserable every time a company rebrands? That's the crossroads we're at. Nostalgia can be soft or it can be sharp. It can comfort us or it can trap us. It can remind us where we've been or it can blind us to where we're going. And that's why I believe this logo story matters more than it seems, because it's not just about Cracker Barrel, it's about us, about how we deal with change, about how we project our fears onto symbols, about how quickly comfort can turn into combat when we feel our traditions being touched. So, family, let me leave you with this reflection. Change will always come. Logos will shift, colors will fade, fonts will swap. But the real charm, the real Southern hospitality, the real community, it was never in the sketch of a man or the curve of a barrel. It was in how people treated each other. It was in the laughter shared at a table. It was in the warmth of being welcomed, not just into a restaurant, but into a space where your humanity was honored. If Cracker Barrel wants to rebrand, let them. The question we should be asking isn't whether the logo feels like Mama's house. It's whether everyone walking through those doors feels like they matter. Because a barrel can't hug you, a font can't feed you, but people can. So yes, let's smile at the irony of folks calling minimalism the death of culture. Let's sigh at how quickly outrage spins up over symbols. But let's also take the lesson, hold on to memories, but don't let them shackle you. Respect tradition, but don't confuse it with exclusion. And when change comes, meet it with perspective, not panic. Because nostalgia is sweet, but dignity is sweeter. And the world is moving forward with or without a barrel leaning against a man.